Hey guys, it's Scott with Scotty B Cards, and in this video I want to look at championships and how they affect card values. We've all heard it, Mike Trout, the best player of our generation, but he's never really had postseason or team success. Does that make Mike Trout good, bad, overrated, underrated? Where is he at? Well, in this video, I'm actually be talking about basketball a little bit, because I'm going to compare basketball to baseball and show what type of players have won championships, what type of players haven't won championships, and kind of compare their card values to see if this is actually true of Mike Trout. So, if you ever wanted to hear me talk about basketball and basketball stats, today's your lucky day, because I'm going to be doing that for a little bit. If you're here just for baseball, stick with me, because it'll be quick. We're going to go over things really quickly on this video. So are championships everything? Let's look at how many Hall of Famers in both the NBA and the MLB Hall of Fame have a championship. So the NBA Hall of Fame rules, I did no international players, no Hall of Famers overseas, just because it wasn't the NBA or ABA championship. Only men's basketball, no women's basketball, no college players as well. And let's look at NBA Hall of Famers with no ring, shall we? So 71% of NBA Hall of Famers actually have a championship. That's a pretty high number. It's kind of a barrier for entry for a lot of players unless you're just really good. Like you see John Stockton and Karl Malone right here. They were just really good. And for that purpose, they got in without a ring. But let's look at what type of players actually do not have rings in the NBA and how it affects their ranking according to experts and fans alike. So here's the notable players without a ring, and these are their rankings according to the ESPN Top 75 list that came out this last year. At number 20 is Elgin Baylor. He did not have a championship. Charles Barkley at number 22, Karl Malone at number 23, John Stockton at number 24, Allen Iverson at number 31, Dominique Wilkins at number 36, Steve Nash at number 37, and Patrick Ewing at number 40. So these are the best players all time, in my opinion, and according to this list's opinion, that do not have a ring in basketball. I want to compare that to the players who don't have a ring in baseball. So according to this list, and according to a lot of fans and experts, not one player is in the top 20 for the NBA without a ring. And the reason for that is because in basketball, like we'll look at in just a moment, it's a lot easier to make an impact as an individual player than it is in baseball. So MLB Hall of Famer rules. We're only counting the World Series past 1903 because that's when the AL played the NL for the World Series, and that's when it all started back in the day. Players needed to play at least half of their career after 1903. So for some players that didn't quite have enough opportunities to win an actual World Series, I did not include them in the percentages because that's not fair. And on top of that, Negro and other foreign leagues were not included since data is not exact, and there weren't as many teams in those leagues, and so it's kind of all over the place, and I didn't want to skew any data because there were only 6 to 8 teams in specific leagues versus Major League Baseball, which had 16 to 24 and so forth. So let's look at MLB Hall of Famers with no rings. Surprisingly, and I was genuinely surprised by this, 64% of Major League Baseball Hall of Famers have won at least one championship. That really surprised me because I expected it to be 40 to 50%. On top of that, one thing I want to point out, before the 1970s and 80s, there was only about 16 teams and then 12 teams in Major League Baseball, and so we didn't have the full 30 teams like we do have modern day players today, which we'll see has an impact on the caliber of players today not winning a World Series. Notable players without a ring, and their ranking according to the Bleacher Report Top 100 list. And I know Barry Bonds is not a Hall of Famer right now. He was not inducted. He might get there one day. But either way, he is ranked as the 3rd best player all time according to a lot of different reports, behind Willie Mays, Babe Ruth, and then Barry Bonds. Whether you agree or disagree, you can't argue with the fact Barry Bonds was the best player for a long time. And his numbers were insane. Way better than his other competitions, still on steroids. So Barry Bonds is at number 3. We have Ted Williams, another top 5. Then we have Ty Cobb, number 6. Mike Trout, who I think will be a top 10 at worst, a top 15 player all time. According to ESPN, they already think he's the 15th best player all time. Ken Griffey Jr. at number 17. Nap Lajoie at number 37. And Ichiro, who I don't know if people are going to rank him, but he is one of the most influential players we've had in a long time in Major League Baseball. He also does not have a World Series. I also want to point out Shohei Ohtani does not have a World Series either, and so it shows some of the most transcendent talent still can't take their team to that next level. So how many top 20 players without a ring? There are 5. I didn't even do anything past the top 20, but there's 5 players in the top 20 in a lot of people's eyes who do not have a championship. So it's not a barrier to entry in being in the greatest of all time discussion, because these players are amazing and we all can agree with that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to compare how often an NBA player can make an impact on a game versus a baseball player can make an impact on a game. So we have Luka. So I want to look at touches. How many times a player actually touches the ball in an NBA game? He touches the ball 91 times a game. The rest of the starting 5, they touch it 34 times for Reggie Bullock, Dwayne Dwight Powell touches it 25 times, Josh Green touches the ball 32 times, and Kyrie Irving touches the ball 76 times. So Luka has 41% of the starting 5 touches, meaning he has the ball 41% of the time compared to the other starting 5. And I want to point out, Kyrie Irving has a very high percentage of touches as well, which means your best 2 players that you're starting in every single game touch the ball about 70 to 80% of the time, which just shows for a player like Mike Trout, he only has about 10 to 12% of the opportunities, while Luka and Kyrie have much more opportunity. Let's look at Nikola Jokic. He touches the ball 100 times a game. The one player in the NBA touches the ball the most is Jokic, and that's because he can do everything. But Jamal Murray has 71 touches a game. Caldwell Pope has 39 times a game. Michael Porter Jr. has 37 times. Aaron Gordon 43, and that means Jokic has 34.5% of the starting 5 touches, just showing again between him and Jamal Murray that is well over 50 to 70% of all the touches are by your best player, giving you the most opportunity. The next thing I want to show is just some percentages. So the Nuggets take about 86.1 shots a game, and then they make about 44 field goals per game. Field goals is just anytime they make a basket that's outside of a free throw. Jokic takes 14.8 shots per game, and that means he takes 17.2% of the Nuggets' field goal attempts. He makes 9.4 field goals per game, which is 21% of the Nuggets' points, and he averages 10.2 assists per game, which is 23.2 of his team's points per game. So altogether, he contributes to 44% of the team's offense on average. On dominant nights when he takes over, it's significantly higher than that number. Let's look at Luka. The Mavericks take about 83 shots per game and make about 39.5 field goals per game. Luka takes 22.1 shots per game. That means he takes 26.6% of the Mavericks' field goal attempts. He makes 11.2 field goals per game. That's 28.35% of the Mavericks' field goals per game. And Luka averages 8.2 assists per game, which is 20.76% of the team's points per game. So overall, Luka contributes to 49.11% of all the team's offense. Literally almost half of all points and all offense comes through Luka. 44% comes through Jokic. It just shows the most dominant players in basketball, they control the offense. On top of that, like we'll get to later, is these players also have a significantly larger impact on defense if they're good defenders. So let's look at some stats for baseball. So you'll see up here at the top, it shows on average what position has how many plate appearances per game. So Mike Trout has roughly 4.5 plate appearances per game because he always bats second, sometimes third. Every other player on the team averages roughly 4.2 plate appearances per game. You can see that right here. So that means there are 38 plate appearances per game. That means Mike Trout only has about 11.8% of a team's opportunities to have any sort of run scoring or offense providing anything, right? While the rest of the lineup averages roughly 11% of a team's plate appearances. So here we have Juan Lugares, who had a terrible year last year, only had 60 at-bats. On any given night, if Juan Lugares is batting 7th, 8th, or 9th, he's taking about 11% of the team's at-bats, while Mike Trout is actually taking only 11.8%. Yes, he only had 60 ABs last year, but it doesn't change the fact any given day, players like Juan Lugares are in the batting order for Major League Baseball teams, and they take about the same exact amount of chances on offense as the best players do. And that's what's hard about baseball. There's 9 players that need to work together. Let's also talk about defense. And I already mentioned this a little bit, but defense is significantly different because Rudy Gobert, he's been kind of tough this year, but historically, he completely changes other teams' offensive approach because he's constantly changing shots around the rim and he's forcing you to push the game further out. The game's already pushing itself further out in basketball, so it's not really helping all that much. But regardless, it completely takes away anything around the rim, and that's significant. Every single time they come down on offense, the opposing team, they have to worry about Gobert. Nolan Arenado is one of the best defensive players in Major League Baseball history, and he can only do it if someone hits the ball at him. He can't go out and defend someone different. He can't go to a different position depending on the person. He stays at third base, and if it doesn't hit to him, he might have 0 chances the entire game if somehow there's not a ball hit his direction. Now let's talk about pitching and how pitching is significantly different in baseball than basketball. Half of the game is something no position player besides Shohei Ohtani can do. Mike Trout is not able to pitch, and because he can't pitch, that is basically 50% of the game. It's the batter against the pitcher with a little bit of help from defense, but it's batter against pitcher, and Mike Trout can't do that. It takes that completely away. He can go 5 for 5 with 5 solo home runs and lose the game 5-6 because his bullpen or his starting rotation blew the game for the Angels. The best teams are dominant pitching along with dominant hitting. That sounds simple, but in the NBA you can get away with dominant offense with an okay defense or an okay offense with an extremely dominant defense. That's not the case in baseball unless you get really lucky in postseason play. So let's look at the starting rotations of each of the World Series winners from the last 4 years. Here's the Astros. You can see they have some great pitching, not one player with a 4 ERA. Justin Verlander to sub 2 ERA. Then we have the Braves. You can see over here, they're all really good so far as well. Then we have the Dodgers in 2020, shortened season. And then we have the Nationals in 2019. All very very good rotations, all very good pitchers those specific years, and that's partially, if not significantly, why those teams won the World Series. Here is the Angels rotations over the last, since 2017, so 6 years. This last year, they actually were a top 10 rotation in baseball. It was their offense that was the problem, but we can see they had a few good pitchers. Everyone else is pretty good still in 2022, but we see every other year, basically in Mike Trout's career, every rotation is terrible towards the bottom, and that makes it almost impossible for one specific offensive player to win a game. So I want to look at modern players that are ring. This is Major League Baseball's top 100 rankings for the top players in Major League Baseball heading into 2023, and I want to just say numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. Basically, almost all the top 10, not one of those players have a championship. If we go even further, Bryce Harper probably should have been in the top 10. He doesn't have a championship. Tatis doesn't have a championship. DeGrom doesn't have a championship. And even GOATs like Joey Votto don't have a championship. So how does this affect baseball cards compared to basketball cards? The truth is, we can look at Ted Williams and Barry Bonds. Unfortunately, did steroids, so it's hard to really compare him. Let's look at Ty Cobb and Ted Williams. Their hobbies not hurt significantly by this. If you want to compare them to Carmelo and John Stockton, their cards are down significantly in comparison. So I just wanted to show why when people say, well, Mike Trout never won a ring, so obviously he's not good. I just wanted to rebuttal that and share my thoughts on this topic and just say rings in baseball are just cherries on top. Players like Mickey Mantle, Derek Jeter, who have multiple championships, it helps their legacy for sure, but it's not a requirement in baseball like it is in basketball and other sports in order to be a GOAT of your generation. One thing I do want to point out as well for these players is now there's more talent discrepancy than ever, so every team is pretty dang good, and there's more teams than ever in Major League Baseball. There's 30 teams, probably going to be 32 in the next 5 or 6 years, which makes it harder to win championship when before the 1960s and 70s, it was like 16 teams. So just be aware of that as well. When you look at old Hall of Famers when they had tons of success, that's probably why. But other than that, thank you for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on championships, and I will see you in the next one.